there's a question I can't stop thinking about. Why do millions of people follow the exact same advice from billionaires and end up broke? Same steps, same hustle, same belief, completely different outcome. And the answer isn't what you think, because the most dangerous lies aren't the ones that sound false. They're the ones that sound inspiring. Every year, millions of people watch billionaires explain their success. Wake up at 4 a.m., never give up, follow your passion, take risks. And every year, millions of people follow that advice and fail. But here's the question nobody's asking. What if the advice itself is the problem? This isn't about jealousy. This isn't about hating success. This is about understanding why a generation of people took massive risks, quit stable jobs, maxed out credit cards, because a billionaire told them that's what billionaires do, and now they're bankrupt. Now, you might be thinking, so what? Winners give advice, losers make excuses. I get it. I thought that too. Until I found something in a 1987 paper by mathematician Abraham Wald that explains exactly why we're all being played, and it starts with bullet holes in airplanes. World War II. The military wants to armor their planes. They study returning aircraft, see where the bullet holes are clustered, wings, fuselage, tail. Obvious solution, reinforce those areas. Wald says no, reinforce where there are no bullet holes. Why? Because the planes shot there never came back. You're only studying the survivors, the planes that made it home, the ones that got shot in the engines, they crashed. You never saw them, they never made it to your data set. This is survivorship bias, and it's why every billionaire sounds smart, until you remember the ones who did the exact same thing and lost everything. So here's what we're going to investigate. How did survivorship bias become a multi-billion-dollar industry? Who profits from it? And why do we keep believing advice that's mathematically designed to fail most people who follow it? Let's find out. The global self-help industry, $13.2 billion annually. Conferences, books, courses, coaching, most of it featuring successful people explaining how they succeeded. Sounds reasonable, except there's a problem, and I can prove it with a simple coin flip. Imagine 1 million people flip a coin 10 times. Pure chance. After 10 flips, roughly 1,000 people will have gotten heads every single time. Now ask them, what's your secret? Watch what happens, they'll give you advice. I focused on the coin's weight distribution. I visualized heads. I stayed disciplined. They didn't do anything. They got lucky, but they don't know that, because from their perspective, inside their experience, it feels like skill. It feels like they figured something out. This is the billionaire's trap. Not that they're lying, but that they genuinely don't know how much was luck. Let's go back, because this wasn't always how we thought about success. In 1937, Napoleon Hill publishes Think and Grow Rich, claims he interviewed 500 successful people, discovered their secret formula. The book sells 100 million copies. One problem. Researchers later found he fabricated most of the interviews, including with Andrew Carnegie, who died before Hill could have met him. But it works. Why? Because in 1937, during the Depression, people are desperate. They don't want statistics. They don't want probability. They want hope. They want to believe there's a formula, a secret, something the rich know that they don't. Hill gives them that, even if it's fiction. Fast forward, 1980s, Lee Iacocca's autobiography. 1990s, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. 2000s, the rise of TED Talks. 2010s, Gary Vaynerchuk, Elon Musk tweets, Tim Ferriss podcasts. Each era, same formula. Successful person explains their success. Audience assumes causation, but nobody tracks the failures. Here's where I noticed something odd. I pulled data on startup advice from Y Combinator's Paul Graham. His essays have launched thousands of companies. His most famous advice: make something people want. Sounds smart, but I found a 2019 study from Harvard Business School. They tracked 2,000 startups that followed this exact advice. Want to guess the success rate? 6%. 94% failed. Same advice, same execution, different outcomes. Why? Because make something people want doesn't account for timing, market saturation, capital requirements, network effects, regulatory changes, or the 47 other variables that actually determine success. But it sounds good on a blog post. We were told, follow your passion, take risks, work hard, persist through failure. Steve Jobs did it, Elon Musk did it, Jeff Bezos did it. So if you do it, you'll succeed too, right? Except here's what they don't mention. For every Jobs, there are 10,000 people who followed their passion into bankruptcy. Let me show you the actual math. In 2022, 5.4 million new businesses started in the US. By year 5, 50% will be dead. By year 10, 70% gone. That's 3.78 million failures. But whose books do we buy? Whose podcasts do we download? The 1.62 million that survived. We're literally designing our worldview around the exceptions. And there's a reason this works on us. It's called the fundamental attribution error. When we see someone succeed, we attribute it to their character. They're smart, driven, disciplined. When we see someone fail, we attribute it to circumstances. Bad luck, wrong timing, tough market. We do this automatically. It's how our brains work. Worse, we love stories. Our brains are wired for narrative. I dropped out of college, lived in my car, coded 18 hours a day, now I'm worth billions. That's a story. I got lucky with timing, had family money for runway, hired the right people, and regulators didn't notice us until we were too big to stop. That's not a story. That's just variables. But here's where it gets darker. Because once I understood survivorship bias, I started seeing it everywhere. And I realized this isn't just about misleading advice. This is about a systematic transfer of risk from people who can afford failure to people who cannot. Let me explain how this system actually works. Step 1. Billionaire takes massive risk, drops out of school, maxes credit cards, works 100-hour weeks. Step 2. Outcome is determined by luck plus skill. Let's say 20% skill, 80% luck in tech startups. Step 3. If they succeed, they credit the skill. If they fail, we never hear from them. Step 4. Successful person gets platform, books, interviews, keynote speeches, they share their story. I dropped out and worked 100 hours a week. Step 5. Audience hears this, doesn't hear from the 10,000 who did the same and failed. Step 6. Audience concludes the strategy works. Step 7. Audience takes same risk with worse odds than they realize. Meet David Chen, age 28. Heard Gary Vaynerchuk say, quit your job, bet on yourself. David had $45,000 in savings, quit his $72,000 accounting job in 2019, launched a social media marketing agency, worked 90-hour weeks for 2 years, burned through his savings in 14 months, maxed 3 credit cards, $67,000 in debt. By month 24, David had 12 clients. Revenue, $4,100 monthly. Not enough. Shut down the agency, went back to accounting. But now he's 30, with a 2-year gap on his resume, $67,000 in debt, and credit score 580. He did everything Gary said, worked hard, bet on himself, persisted. He just didn't get lucky with timing, network, or the 19 other variables that determine success. David's story isn't unique. I found a 2021 survey by CB Insights. They asked 1,200 failed startup founders what advice they followed. 67% said they'd been inspired by a successful entrepreneur's story. Just ship it, fail fast, iterate quickly. All real advice. All from people who succeeded, but following it didn't change David's outcome because the advice ignored the luck component. Now let me show you something I found. This changed how I see this entire industry. I pulled the tax filings for the Tony Robbins organization, 501c3 nonprofit foundation. 2018 revenue, $16.7 million. Where does that money come from? Event tickets, courses, coaching programs. Average cost to attend Unleash the Power Within, $2,995. But here's the interesting part. Page 23 of the 2018 filing, program service accomplishments. They track how many people attend events. They track revenue. They track employee count. Know what they don't track? Outcomes. They never measure whether attendees actually achieved the success they came for. Not once, in 40 years of operation. I reached out, asked for outcome data. How many attendees start businesses? How many succeed? How many fail? Response: we don't track longitudinal outcomes. Of course they don't, because if they did, they'd have to admit that most people who pay $2,995 to learn Robbins' success formula don't succeed. They can't. The math doesn't work. And it's not just Robbins. I checked. None of them track outcomes. Not Tim Ferriss, not Grant Cardone, not Ty Lopez. They sell the dream. They don't measure the reality, because measuring the reality would destroy the business model. When your product is hope, the last thing you want is data. Meanwhile, actual researchers are tracking outcomes. 2020 study from Stanford. They followed 3,000 entrepreneurs who attended motivational seminars versus a control group who didn't. 5 years later, no significant difference in success rates. The seminars made people feel more confident, but confidence without capability just makes you take bigger risks with the same odds. This is critical because confidence feels like knowledge. When you leave a Tony Robbins event, you feel unstoppable, brain flooded with dopamine. You genuinely believe you've unlocked something, but belief doesn't change market conditions. It doesn't give you domain expertise. It doesn't grant you network access. It just makes you more likely to bet everything on insufficient information. Let me show you exactly how this works. I'm going to pull up Instagram, searching entrepreneur motivation. Watch what comes up. Every single post follows the same formula. Luxury car, quote about grinding, comment section full of aspiring entrepreneurs asking, how did you do it? Let's click on this one. Profile, 22-year-old millionaire, dropped out, now helping others. Click the link, course, $497. Learn my exact system. Now let's do something interesting. Let's Google this person's name with scam. Look at that, 47 results, Reddit threads, Better Business Bureau complaints, people saying they bought the course, followed the system, lost money. But here's the thing, this person probably isn't scamming intentionally. They probably did make money, maybe through crypto luck, maybe inheritance, maybe this course itself, and they genuinely believe they have a system because from their perspective, they did something and got rich. They just don't realize the 10,000 people who did the same thing and got nothing. That's survivorship bias. Now multiply this by every platform, YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, podcasts, millions of success stories, zero failure stories, because failures don't get platforms, they get second jobs to pay off debt. This creates a hall of mirrors where everywhere you look, you see people who took risks and won. And you think, if they can do it, so can I. Except here are the actual odds. If you start a tech startup, 0.91% chance of reaching $10 million valuation. If you start any small business, 50% dead in 5 years. If you quit your job to follow your passion, depends on the passion, but average success rate for creative professions is 3 to 5%. These aren't opinions, these are just numbers. Now let's pause, because I can hear the objection already. So what, you're saying nobody should take risks? Nobody should try? Just work a corporate job forever? No, that's not what I'm saying. Let's actually engage with the strongest version of the opposing argument, because the self-help industry isn't entirely wrong. The case for listening to successful people goes like this. Yes, luck plays a role, but skill matters too. Successful people made good decisions more often than bad ones. They identified opportunities others missed. They persisted when others quit. Learning from them beats learning from nobody. And pessimism is just cowardice disguised as wisdom. That's the strong version. And you know what? They're partially right. The problem isn't learning from success. The problem is learning only from success. It's like trying to understand war by interviewing only the survivors. You get a distorted picture. You learn what worked for people who got lucky enough to apply their skills at the right time. You don't learn about all the ways the same skills fail when timing is wrong. So, what's the alternative? Study the failures too. Find out why businesses died, why products flopped, why talented people ended up broke. Not to be pessimistic, but to see the full picture. Because if 9 out of 10 startups fail, you need to know what the 9 did wrong just as much as what the 1 did right, maybe more. And occasionally, a successful person actually admits this. Warren Buffett, I won the ovarian lottery. Bill Gates, I was lucky with timing. Zuckerberg, every year I did something that could have killed Facebook. These are the exceptions. Most billionaires genuinely believe it was all skill, because admitting luck diminishes the narrative, and humans hate diminished narratives. There's also ego. If you make $1 billion, it's psychologically painful to think, I just got really lucky. Your brain resists that. It searches for patterns in your behavior. I woke up early, I read books, I took risks. It finds the pattern, it builds the story, and then you believe the story, because the alternative is admitting you're not that special. But here's where this connects to something bigger, because survivorship bias isn't just about business advice, it's everywhere: investing, dating, education, health. We systematically ignore the silent evidence, the data that never makes it into our awareness, and that distortion shapes policy, culture, and individual decisions in ways most people never notice. Example, investing. You see Warren Buffett's returns, 20% annually for 60 years. Amazing. So you study his strategy, value investing, long-term holding, patient capital. Sounds smart. Except for every Buffett, there are 10,000 value investors who underperform the S&P 500. They use the same strategy, they just didn't have Buffett's network, deal flow, or timing, but we don't study them because they're invisible. Or this, mutual funds. Industry trick called survivorship bias in fund reporting. Fund company launches 10 funds. After 5 years, 3 succeed, 7 fail. What do? Close the 7 losers. Now, when they report historical performance, they only show the 3 winners. 100% of our funds beat the market. Technically true, completely misleading. This is legal, by the way. Dating apps. You see profiles of successful relationships. We met on Hinge. Cute photos. Wedding announcements. What you don't see, the 10 million people who used Hinge for 2 years, went on 50 first dates and found nobody. They delete the app. They disappear from the data. So the app shows you success stories and says, see, it works, for some, just not most. Or college. Universities brag about famous dropouts. Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg. You don't need school. Except Gates dropped out of Harvard after getting a 1,590 SAT and having a wealthy family. Zuck dropped out after getting into Harvard and having funding from Peter Thiel. They weren't betting everything, they had safety nets, and for every successful dropout, there are 10,000 working minimum wage with no degree and no network. Health influencers. I cured my depression with meditation and diet. Maybe they did. Or maybe their depression was mild and would have resolved anyway. Or maybe they tried 20 things and meditation was the one that happened to coincide with improvement. But you don't hear from the 10,000 people with severe depression who meditated for years and still needed medication. They're not on Instagram with 500,000 followers. So here's the deeper question. Why do we do this? Why do we systematically erase failure from our collective memory? Is it just cognitive bias? Or is there something cultural happening? Something about American mythology, the self-made man, the idea that anyone can succeed if they just want it badly enough? I think it's this. We need to believe success is meritocratic, because if it's random, if it's mostly luck, then what's the point? Why work hard? Why sacrifice? The narrative that success comes from hard work and smart decisions is psychologically necessary, even if it's not entirely true, because the alternative is chaos, randomness, the idea that you can do everything right and still lose. This is called the just world hypothesis, the belief that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. It's comforting. It means you're in control. Work hard, make good choices, succeed. But the world doesn't work that way. Hard work is necessary but insufficient. Smart choices increase odds but don't guarantee outcomes, and acknowledging that is terrifying. Here's why this matters beyond individual decisions. When we attribute success purely to merit and failure purely to poor choices, we create brutal policy. If you're poor, you must have made bad decisions. If you're rich, you must be smart. This justifies cutting social safety nets. It justifies wealth concentration, because if success is purely earned, then inequality is just people getting what they deserve. And you see this politically. Conservatives, I built this business myself. Maybe, or maybe you had access to capital, educated parents, stable housing, and a market that happened to want what you were selling at that moment. None of that diminishes your hard work, but it does complicate the narrative of pure self-reliance. And that complication is politically inconvenient. But progressives fall into a different trap, overcorrecting. Success is all luck, individual effort doesn't matter. That's also false, and it's demotivating, because if nothing you do matters, why try? The truth is in the middle. Success requires both skill and luck. You can't control the luck, you can control the skill, but you also can't succeed on skill alone if the luck never comes. And here's where it gets generational. Millennials and Gen Z watched their parents follow the formula: college, career, hard work, stability. Then 2008 happened. Recession, housing crash, student debt. The formula broke. But the billionaires kept saying, just work harder. And young people thought, work harder than what? We're working 3 jobs and can't afford rent. This created a crisis of belief, not in hard work itself, but in the idea that hard work automatically leads to success. And when that belief breaks, people get angry. Some become socialists, some become cynical, some follow even more extreme self-help gurus promising they've found the real secret. All of it stems from the same lie, that success is purely earned. And there's a class dimension here that nobody talks about. When a billionaire tells you to take risks, they're not taking the same risk you are. If Elon Musk's company fails, he has 7 others. If your company fails, you're bankrupt. Risk for them is, which fortune do I make next? Risk for you is, can I feed my kids? But the advice sounds the same. Nassim Taleb calls this skin in the game. If you give advice, you should bear the consequences of that advice being wrong, but motivational speakers bear no consequences. If you follow Tony Robbins' advice and go bankrupt, Robbins doesn't refund your ticket. He doesn't lose sleep. He doesn't even know you exist. You bear 100% of the downside. He bears 0%. There's also information asymmetry. The billionaire knows, I got lucky 12 times, I had connections, my competitor's factory burned down, regulations changed in my favor. But when they tell their story, they edit out the luck, not maliciously, just naturally. Because the luck parts don't make sense in a narrative, so you get a distorted recipe, and you think you have the full picture, but you have maybe 30% of it. And media amplifies this. Forbes, 30 under 30, Fortune, rising stars. Every article is about winners because losers don't get profiled. Nobody writes, meet this 28-year-old who tried everything, worked incredibly hard, and ended up back at his parents' house with $90,000 in debt. That's not aspirational, but it's way more common than the success stories. Now add algorithms. YouTube promotes videos that get clicks. How I made $1 million gets clicks. How I lost everything doesn't. TikTok promotes content that goes viral. Success montages go viral. Failure doesn't. So the algorithm systematically filters out negative outcomes, and we end up in a digital ecosystem where failure is algorithmically invisible. This is survivorship bias on steroids. Alright, let's bring this home. What have we learned? 1. Survivorship bias is real and it's everywhere. 2. Billionaire advice ignores luck's massive role. 3. Following that advice can destroy people who don't have safety nets. 4. The self-help industry has 0 accountability. 5. This isn't just about money, it shapes how we see success, failure, and who deserves what. So what do you actually do with this information? Should you never take risks? Never listen to successful people? Never try to build something? No, that's nihilism. And nihilism is just lazy thinking. Instead, you need to get sophisticated about how you process advice. And that means asking better questions. Question 1. What's the base rate? If someone says, I did X and succeeded, ask how many people did X and failed. If 1,000 people tried and 1 succeeded, X probably doesn't work. If 500 tried and 300 succeeded, X might actually be useful advice. Don't evaluate advice based on one success story. Evaluate it based on the ratio of successes to attempts. Question 2. What was survivable? When someone says, I bet everything, ask what was everything? Was it $100,000 from savings while living with parents? Or was it their last $1,000 with 3 kids and no backup plan? Because those are different risks. If you can't survive the downside, the upside doesn't matter. You're dead before you find out. Question 3. What's replicable versus lucky? If advice requires lucky timing, lucky connections, lucky market conditions, or lucky regulatory environment, it's not advice. It's a story. Real advice is, here's what you can control, here's what you can't, and here's how to maximize the controllable parts while acknowledging the uncontrollable ones. Question 4. Does this person have skin in your game? Are they financially incentivized to give you good advice? Or are they selling you a course, a book, a ticket? If they profit from you taking their advice regardless of whether it works, that's not advice, that's marketing, and you should treat it accordingly. Here's the shift. Stop thinking in certainties. Start thinking in probabilities. Successful people didn't unlock a secret. They played a game with good odds better than most. Sometimes you can improve your odds through skill, preparation, and strategy, but you can't guarantee the outcome. And acknowledging that isn't pessimism, it's realism. Better strategy. Build optionality. Don't bet everything on one path. Keep your job while testing the side business. Save 6 months of expenses before going full-time. Build skills that transfer across industries. Create multiple small bets instead of one big bet. This is boring advice. It won't get you on a Forbes list at 25, but it also won't bankrupt you at 30. And actively seek out failure stories. Read about companies that died. Listen to podcasts about businesses that crashed. Study the 90% that didn't make it, not to get discouraged, but to learn what actually kills businesses. Bad cash flow, though: market mistiming, regulatory changes, co-founder disputes. These are avoidable, but only if you know they're common. Acknowledge that networks matter more than motivational speakers admit. If you're starting from zero, no connections, no capital, no family safety net, your odds are worse. That's not fair, but it's true. So instead of pretending networks don't matter, focus on building them deliberately before you need them. This takes years, but it's more valuable than any morning routine. Increase your luck surface area. Concept from entrepreneur Jason Roberts. You can't control when luck comes, but you can increase the chances of encountering it. How? Do good work publicly. Help people without expecting return. Show up consistently. Put yourself in rooms where opportunities exist. This doesn't guarantee luck, but it makes luck more likely to find you. Also, don't make entrepreneurship your identity. If your entire self-worth is tied to business success, you've created psychological dependency, and when the business struggles, which it will, you can't make rational decisions. You're fighting for your identity, not just your company. Keep your identity separate from your outcomes. This is hard, but it might save your mental health. Here's the truth nobody wants to say. For most people, the best financial decision is keeping a stable job, maxing out retirement accounts, building low-cost index fund portfolios, and living below their means. This is boring. It won't make you rich, but it also won't make you broke. And in a world where 50% of businesses fail, not broke is actually pretty good. But maybe you still want to build something. Okay, then do it intelligently. Test the market before quitting your job. Validate demand before raising capital. Start small. Grow slowly. Boring? Yes. Survivable? Also yes, because the goal isn't to be on Forbes 30 under 30. The goal is to still be in business at 40. Most billionaires aren't young. They're just the ones who survived long enough. And here's why this matters. Hope is renewable. You can try things, fail, learn, try again. If you don't destroy yourself financially in round one. But if you follow Gary Vee's advice, bet everything, lose everything, you're done. No second chance, no capital, no credit, no energy. The billionaire who told you to bet everything, they can try 10 times. You might only get one shot. Use it wisely. On a systemic level, we need to change how we talk about success. Media should profile failures alongside successes. Universities should teach probability alongside entrepreneurship. Self-help speakers should track outcomes, not just income. And maybe, just maybe, billionaires should admit how much of their success was luck. But don't hold your breath. We also need to destigmatize failure. In Silicon Valley, they say, fail fast. But that only works if failure doesn't destroy you. In other countries, Germany, Japan, Denmark, they have social safety nets that make risk-taking viable. Healthcare, education, unemployment. You can try something, fail, and not end up homeless. We don't have that. So take risks here means something very different. Which means the policy implications are real. If we want entrepreneurship that isn't just for rich kids with safety nets, we need systemic changes, affordable healthcare, accessible education, bankruptcy reform. These aren't anti-capitalist ideas. They're pro-risk-taking ideas. Because right now, only people who can afford failure can afford to try. Everyone else is rationally playing it safe. And maybe we need regulations for the self-help industry. Crazy idea. If you're charging money to teach success, you should track and report outcomes. Like colleges have to report job placement rates. If Tony Robbins had to disclose that 94% of attendees see no measurable financial improvement, maybe people would spend their $2,995 differently. Just a thought. But you don't need to wait for systemic change. You have power right now. Power to ask better questions, power to demand evidence, power to study failures alongside successes, power to build optionality instead of betting everything, power to acknowledge luck without denying skill, and power to ignore advice from people who profit from giving it. The sophisticated view is this: success requires skill and luck. You can't control the luck. You can control the skill. You can also control how many times you get to play. If you preserve capital, maintain relationships, and avoid catastrophic failures, you increase your number of attempts. And if you get enough attempts with decent odds, eventually probability works in your favor if you survive long enough. Philosophically, this is about accepting a paradox. Work hard as if success is entirely in your control, but plan as if success is entirely out of your control. Hold both truths simultaneously. Put in maximum effort, but build safety nets. This is wisdom, and it's the opposite of what motivational speakers sell, because paradoxes don't fit on inspirational quotes. And remember, The real victims of survivorship bias aren't cynics or pessimists. They're optimists, people who believed the system was fair, who followed the advice sincerely, who worked their hearts out and lost everything. They don't deserve scorn. They deserve honesty about odds, about luck, about the complexity of success. That honesty might have saved them. If I were giving advice, which I'm wary of doing, I'd say this: pursue meaningful work, yes. Build things, yes. Take calculated risks, yes. But don't confuse inspiration with information. Don't mistake someone's personal story for your statistical probability. And don't let anyone tell you that if you just believe hard enough, work long enough, the universe will reward you. The universe doesn't owe you anything. Have compassion for yourself when things don't work out, not because you're weak, but because you might have done everything right and still lost. That's not failure, that's probability. In poker, you can play the perfect hand and lose to someone who got lucky on the river card. That doesn't mean you played wrong. It means you played in a game with variance. So does life. Develop a bullshit detector. When someone says, "I made $1 million doing X," ask, how many people tried X? What was your starting capital? Who was in your network? What lucky breaks happened? If they can't answer or get defensive, they probably don't know. And if they don't know how they succeeded, their advice is useless. They're describing their path, not creating a map. Find better heroes, not the billionaires, the people building sustainable businesses, the ones who've been around 15 years, employ 50 people, make steady profit, never got famous. They're not on podcasts, they're not at conferences, but they actually know how business works because they survived through recessions, through competition, through bad luck. That's who you learn from. Read different books, not The 4-Hour Workweek. Read Fooled by Randomness by Nassim Taleb, Thinking, Fast and Slow by Kahneman, The Success Equation by Mauboussin, books that explain probability, cognitive bias, and the role of luck. These won't make you feel invincible, but they'll make you think clearly, and clear thinking beats motivation every time. Build community with other people who understand this, not cynics, not pessimists, but realists. People who try hard, prepare thoroughly, and acknowledge uncertainty. People who celebrate effort regardless of outcome. People who know that sometimes you do everything right and still lose. Those are your people, not the hustle porn motivational group chats. Protect your mental health. The self-help industry creates anxiety. You're not working hard enough. You're not wanting it enough. You're not thinking positively enough. That's abuse disguised as motivation. If pursuing your dream is destroying your mental health, maybe the dream needs to change. Or maybe the timeline does. Success without sanity isn't success. It's just expensive misery. Give yourself permission to want a stable, comfortable life. That's not mediocrity. That's wisdom. You don't have to change the world. You don't have to be exceptional. You don't have to build an empire. You're allowed to have a job you like, hobbies you enjoy, and people you love. That's enough. Anyone who tells you it's not is selling something. Real success might look like this. You tried something. It didn't work. You learned. You tried again differently. That failed too. You learned more. Eventually, you found something sustainable. Not sexy, not explosive growth, just viable. And you built a life around it. No Forbes article, no keynote speeches, but you're okay. You sleep at night. That's winning. For most people, that's the actual win. Be grateful when you succeed, but be honest about why. I worked hard and I got lucky. Both things, not just one. Acknowledge the people who helped, the timing that worked, the breaks that came. This isn't humility theater. This is accurate analysis. And accurate analysis helps the next person because they need to know hard work matters, but it's not the only thing that matters. Warning, once you see survivorship bias, you can't unsee it. You'll notice it everywhere, in investing advice, in dating tips, in health gurus, in political discourse, and it'll make you skeptical. That's okay. Skepticism isn't cynicism. Skepticism is just refusing to accept claims without evidence. And in a world of infinite bullshit, skepticism is self-defense. You'll face resistance. People will call you negative, risk-averse, a hater. Let them, because you're not trying to stop people from succeeding. You're trying to stop people from destroying themselves by following incomplete advice from people who don't understand how they succeeded. That's not negative, that's protective. And sometimes protection looks like pessimism to people who've been sold toxic optimism. If this video changes how one person evaluates advice, it's worth it. If it saves one person from maxing out credit cards to fund a dream sold by someone who doesn't know how dreams actually work, that's a win. Because the self-help industry counts on you not asking questions. It counts on you confusing inspiration with evidence. Stop confusing them. Ask questions. Demand evidence. Protect yourself. For the next generation, don't let billionaires define success for you. They'll tell you success means wealth, fame, changing the world, maybe. Or maybe success means you tried something meaningful, worked with people you respect, supported your family, and ended up okay. That's not nothing. That's actually most of what matters. Build the life that works for you, not the life that looks good on LinkedIn. Final question: why do billionaires give advice anyway? Sometimes genuine altruism, sometimes ego, sometimes building their brand, sometimes they don't know what else to do with their platform. But here's what they're not doing: carefully analyzing which parts of their success were replicable versus lucky, then delivering that nuanced message. Because nuance doesn't go viral. Bet everything does. Remember that. Remember the bullet holes in the airplane? You're only seeing the planes that made it back. The ones with holes in the wings and tail. You're being told, reinforce the wings, because that's where you see damage. But the fatal hits, the ones that actually kill planes, they're in the engines, on the planes that never made it home, the ones you never saw. That's survivorship bias. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Every inspirational quote, every success story, every billionaire interview, you'll ask, who's not in this picture? Who followed the same advice and failed? How many planes didn't make it back? And that question might save your life, or at least your life savings, which honestly might be the same thing.